to their futures. Soldiers speak out.
Welcome to the Veterans Hour, a monthly program produced by the Rachel Corrie Chapter, 109 Veterans for Peace in Olympia, Washington. I'm Mark Fleming, your host for this month's program. Veterans for Peace is a global organization of military veterans and allies whose collective efforts build a culture of peace. As Veterans for Peace, we bring a unique and important voice to the issues of war and peace. We inform the public of the true causes and enormous costs of war and emphasize the nation's obligation to heal the wounds of war. The Rachel Corrie Chapter at Olympia is one of over 140 chapters worldwide whose work includes educating the public, advocating for a dismantling of the war economy, providing services that assist veterans and victims of war, and most significantly, working to end all wars. Each month, we present a program focusing on veterans issues, and matters of war and peace. This program is one of a series of stories that recount individuals' experiences during military service. These stories are an important way of informing the public of war's reality. Previous programs in this series describe Chapter 109 members' experiences in Korea and Vietnam and how those experiences affected them at the time and in the years since. Those stories may be found on the chapter's VFP 109 YouTube channel. In addition, you can find podcasts of Vietnam veteran stories at the Vietnam Full Disclosure website. The Full Disclosure campaign is a Veterans for Peace effort to keep alive the anti-war perspective on the American war in Vietnam. It presents a clear alternative to the Pentagon's 50th anniversary events that sanitize and mythologize the Vietnam War and thereby legitimize further and unnecessary destructive wars. These podcasts are at vietnamfulldisclosure.org. Our guest for this program is David Johannes. He served in the Navy as a combat medic with the U.S. Marines in Vietnam. He's a native of Hoquiam, Washington, and lived many years in Key West, Florida. And he currently lives in Lacey, Washington. And welcome to the program, David. Thank you very much for coming. I appreciate you telling your story.
Thank you.
So I gave you a very brief introduction of you. So tell me a little bit more about what you did. You said you joined the Navy and
joined the Navy Reserve to avoid the draft in 1965 and went on active duty in 1967 for 2 years active duty. And I was first stationed in Hospital Corps School in San Diego, and then I was transferred to Bremerton, Washington in the Naval Hospital up there. And I had a good time. It was fun to do.
Mm-hmm. And then you said you were called to active duty.
I was called to Vietnam, yes. I got 30 days leave, and then I was gone.
And that was what year?
1967.
Okay. So when you got to Vietnam, what did you do?
I was attached to a ground force, 1-5 Alpha, and we were out in the jungle. We had everything we owned on our back and traveled from sunrise to sunset and tried to make camp somewhere for the night and get up and do the same thing day after day.
So you were on patrol with the Marines.
Yep.
And just for our listeners, so you were in the Navy, but you served with the Marine Corps.
Right. The Marine Corps does not have a medical branch. They are part of the Navy, and we provide them with medical service.
So even though you joined the Navy to avoid the draft, somehow you ended up in Vietnam in combat.
I just picked a job that put me in a hazardous situation. Yeah.
So once you were there, what was it like? I mean, so you said you get up every day, you patrol. What were the patrols?
We ended up hiking through the jungle, looking for a objective that was unknown to us. Somebody must have known.
Mm-hmm. And you worked out of what kind of base were you
We were up
stationed
north
at?
out of Da Nang,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of the time out of Phu Bai, which was a little bit further north.
So you're up in what was called I Corps.
I Corps,
Up
yes.
toward the DMZ.
Right.
So that's where it was cold at times, kind of wet and ugly.
I don't have anything to compare it to. It was all the same.
Yeah?
It was pretty warm all the time.
I've heard stories some places up north were cold, so apparently it wasn't that way for you.
We had some rain, some showers came through in the monsoon season.
And you said every day you were on patrol, and so while you're on patrol, you were camping, setting up in the jungle every night. So you also worked out of a base?
We worked out of Anwa part of the time and Fubai part of the time.
And was that a fire base, established? What kind of secure?
It was a Marine established area.
Was that pretty secure?
Yeah,
It was-
yep.
So you weren't on like a remote fire base, just scraped out of the jungle, or were you?
We'd come in once every 30 days for a hot shower and hot food.
How long did you get to stay?
Overnight.
One night?
Then we were back out in the jungle again. Yep.
So let me get that straight. So you would go out for how long?
30 days.
30 days, come back one day for a shower, go out for another 30 days. You guys are hardcore.
That's what they wanted out of us.
Yeah. I mean,
And they'd fly us out, and we'd have to walk back. So we got to fly in helicopters part way anyway.
yeah. And the walking back was the patrol.
Was the sweep, yeah.
So what would happen on these patrols? Like what was an average day like?
Oh, any combination of things. We'd get lost in the jungle or stuck somewhere where it was too steep to go, and we'd have to backtrack and come up a different hill and fight our way through the jungle just because it was so thick. Occasionally we'd make contact with some enemy, and we'd have to deal with that accordingly. Always, when you're walking, you're always looking for a place to dive and hide. Hide behind a tree or something.
Look, to get as low as possible.
Right.
And relatively speaking, I mean, how much time were you just out walking through the boonies compared to in combat or in contact?
We'd come in contact with the enemy probably once a month.
So most of the time you're just out walking through the jungle waiting for something to happen.
Then you let your guard down, yeah, and then it happens.
And how hard was it to keep your guard up in those circumstances?
Well, you come to attention pretty fast when they start shooting at you.
Yeah. I seem to recall something like that.
Yeah. We had some mortars pounded on us. We had our own jets called in on us one time. They didn't know where we were, that we were the friendly people out there.
Were those your people calling in the jets?
Yeah.
So that was your Air Force forward observers bringing them in on you because they didn't know where you were.
We had a hard time getting them off of us, too.
Yeah.
They dropped napalm in front of our point man, and everybody ran for cover, and we had heat casualties, and it was a mess.
Sounds like war's a messy business.
It is.
It doesn't sound very logical at all, but I think that's one of the things we learn in the process.
Well, they didn't let us make many choices in it.
Yeah. Well, let's say you're enlisted, along with all the other. So enlisted people don't really have a lot of choices. You're just there and said, go here, go there, do this, don't die,
Yep.
or maybe die.
They gave us a weapon. They gave us a .45 when we were issued our gear, and I always picked up a Marine's M16
Oh, as a corpsman.
as a corpsman.
So that your standard issue was a
I was
45.
allowed by the Geneva Convention to protect myself and my patient, and that's what I did. So every time I fired my weapon, it was defending my patient.
Yeah. And how many people did you have to patch up?
I don't know if I can count them all.
Is that
Some civilians, too.
Yeah. So when you say patching up civilians, is that because they were injured in the course of an engagement, or you were just providing civil outreach to them?
When we were on a bridge security or something, we would help the community.
So what did that involve?
Well, if we were on bridge security, we would kind of blend in with the area and just stand guard of the bridge to keep it from getting blown up at night and in the daytime. And pretty boring, really.
I can imagine. How do Americans blend into a Vietnamese area?
You don't.
I was
You
gonna
stand
say-
out like a sore thumb.
Kind of tall, very light-skinned,
Yeah.
large, if I remember. And what was bridge security? You said just you would go out and guard that bridge day and night over a period of time?
Yep. We were on bridge security on Highway 1 for a while, up near Anwa, and the whole company was on, which includes four platoons, and they sent myself and another squad plus out on to support a smaller bridge one night. And during the night, the enemy overran the bridge and had 90% casualties there.
This is the bridge that you were on?
No, the bridge that I left,
The other one.
that everybody else was on. So I lost a lot of friends.
Yeah, I can imagine. So you guys were not hit.
Nope, we didn't receive any incoming fire.
How do you deal with that?
You just let the adrenaline come on when it's time to come on.
Yeah.
Do what you got to do.
And that brings up the question that I always have, is like, how do you deal with the fear? I mean, maybe you weren't afraid. It's hard to imagine not.
Or you're afraid all the time.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it seems like the idea might be it just becomes normal. I mean, that's...
Yeah, you're ready to go all the time.
Yeah. Seem to recall the military had the phrase snafu, situation normal, all effed up.
Yep.
So just that becomes your normal. So what you and I civilians would think of as being totally unacceptable, totally impossible, it's everyday life.
The good news is they'd give us 2 meals a day.
2 meals?
2 meals of World War II sea rations.
You guys, I was going to say the Army did better. We got 3 meals a day. they were sea ration, but I think they were World War II. I think mine were dated, like some I saw were dated 1966.
Oh, ours were way old.
Yeah. So coming later was probably an advantage. How much weight did you lose? Or did you?
I don't know. I never weighed myself.
Yeah. Did you have a sense that you were...
I knew I was in the best shape I'll ever be in my whole life, carrying everything I owned on my back all day long, climbing up hills. One time we climbed up a hill that was 1,192 meters tall, and we never did know what reason that was for.
So you just went up and then went down?
Went up,
over?
spent the night up there, and I think it took us 2 days to get up. And we had to tie ourselves onto a tree so we didn't roll down the hill.
At night?
At night. Otherwise, you'd turn over in your night when it was your turn to sleep if you're not on watch.
So actually, talk about that. When you're set up at night, you have a defensive perimeter of some sort.
Yep, they form a perimeter. Yeah.
What was your position? What did you have as far as sleeping gear?
We had a poncho liner and a poncho.
Okay. A poncho liner was a nylon, basically a pretty light nylon blanket, so to speak, and then your rubber poncho.
Just the rubberized poncho.
Yeah.
No air mattress.
Yeah.
No nothing.
Yeah. So just digging out a spot on the ground and sleeping there. Yeah. So.
And then the guys had to form a perimeter and take turns being on guard during the evening and radio watch. Somebody was on the radio all the time.
And how large of a unit was this you were out with?
Company was usually, I think, 30-some people.
A company was 30?
I think so.
Okay.
I don't recall directly. And we had a machine gunner, and then everybody carried machine gun ammo.
Yeah, so you had 30 people, you had machine gun. Like I was saying, an Army company that I served with was like maybe 120, and our platoons were about 30, so maybe yours were a different size. But still, so it's just like 30 people out there in the middle of the jungle.
I think it was mostly as a platoon then.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your company might be over 100. Did you travel mainly in platoon sizes?
Yeah.
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 Like we always traveled in pretty much in company size.
No, we would go out on our own.
Yeah. So that's not a whole lot of people. When you did have contact and engagement, what level of forces were you dealing with, or did you have a sense as you're dealing with?
You really can't tell. You just know a bunch of people are shooting at you, and you start shooting back. Call in for artillery or air support.
Yeah. And just hope it'd go away.
Yeah.
And apparently they usually did. But it was still made for long afternoons or nights.
Yep. Gets the adrenaline going.
Yeah. And on that, given all the things that you saw, were there any aspects of this that you found actually, I guess, positive, or that you felt really changed you for the better? I mean, you said you were in the best shape you'd ever been in, which is kind of a dubious achievement under the circumstances, but...
It gradually changed me, I think, little by little. You're just not aware of it at the time.
But you can look at how you were when you went in and how what was the difference that you could see looking back?
I think other people saw more changes in me than I did.
That's probably true, because you say you just saw it as natural progression from where you were when you joined to here you are when you came out. Did you know that something had changed? Did you have a sense that anything had changed?
No, my mom and dad told me I'd changed.
Okay. And then it became aware of it from there. So you did, now you spent that time out in the field with the Marines, but you also had a second job, second assignment while you were in Vietnam.
After I got basically a promotion from the field, I went to an artillery base. It was M109 self-propelled 155 howitzers, and there was probably 120 guys on the hill that we were in charge of as corpsmen. And we had a little sick bay set up and a little hooch built that we'd slept in and stuff. We had a refrigerator in there and a little reel-to-reel.
You had electricity.
We had electricity, yep. Had the generator running all the time. A little motor pool.
So that must have been a luxury after the field.
It was. It really was.
So how long were you in the field before you transitioned?
About 6 months in the field.
And then the second 6 months you transitioned to this base.
Artillery unit, yeah.
So you weren't hopping up and down hills into the jungle, but you were still in a pretty, sounds like a pretty forward position.
Yeah, and we went out further forward too, out closer to the border, on a little hole on a sweep out there, a little hill. And we ran the self-propelled M109s out there and set up an artillery base out there and did artillery fire from there.
So you had the main base, but then these artillery pieces, you said, were self-propelled, so they can drive them out to another position.
Like a big tank with an artillery weapon on it, yeah.
And then you set out another position depending on the nature of the operation.
Even closer to the border, yeah. And
So-
I think they could shoot about 25 miles.
I know that those were 155s, you said? Yeah, they have pretty good range.
And
So
one night we fired 875 rounds, something like that, everything we had when we were back on the main hill, because they'd have big bunkers of storage and that.
You could only take so much out with you.
Yeah, we couldn't take much out with us, but
And how long did these patrols last?
we were out for 2 weeks, I think, or a month.
And that was that pretty routine? You'd go out for a couple weeks and come back to the main base?
I was only with them when they did it one time.
And the rest of the time you were back on this
Back
base?
on the base, yeah.
I think you told me while you were on the base you had a refrigerator and you had were able to sell sodas? Or-
We had a EM club that we sold cold beer and soda in at night for the Marines. The Marines that weren't on guard duty. So the doc usually got to run the club,
Yeah.
take care of the money and order more beer and
That's
keep them going, keep them happy.
I was going to say that keeps them up and functioning. That's part of the medical function, isn't it?
Yeah. Health and welfare.
Yeah. And were there any unique experiences there during that?
We did get overran one night. We had infantry inside of our wire, and we had
You said their infantry?
their infantry was inside of our wire, the locals, and we had 2 casualties, and Jay and I both went out to help them, and one of them was blown outside of our wire, outside of our perimeter. I went out and got him and dragged him back in so we could work on him.
This is the Vietnamese enemy.
No,
one of
our
your
guys.
people, okay.
One of our guys. And he didn't make it. He was injured too badly. One thing we found over there is they were either minor injuries or major injuries. So mostly little things or they're dead.
Now,
We threw a lot of bodies on helicopters.
And you say a lot of bodies, so on a pretty regular basis?
Not too regular, but every time we did it, it was too much.
Enough to make a very definite impression.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
imagine. And then, so once you were done with that, you came home. So what was that like?
I remember lifting off at the air base at Da Nang, and it was like the world of weight came off of me as the plane took off the ground. Just an awesome experience.
I can imagine. In fact, I remember a similar experience. A lot of cheering when I heard the plane left the ground.
Yep.
And then you got back to the States, and where did you go from there?
Went to San Francisco, I think, and then we were released for back to our duty station then, which was I went back to the Navy Reserve.
Because you still have more time to serve.
No,
Oh, that-
no, I got out.
So you separated
Yeah.
once you got back to your duty
Right.
station?
Mm-hmm.
So now you're a civilian.
Right.
So what did you do from there?
Went back to normal.
And do you have a sense of how you were different? I mean, you said your parents said you were different. You didn't feel different.
First week or so, I ended up waking up on the ground because I was so used to sleeping on the ground. I ended up down there for some reason. I don't know why, but
Stay low, avoid the mortars.
you just have a reflex, I guess. Going out to the ocean one time, at night, some helicopters came over a hill on a moonlit night, and it just gave me chills. Looking for the ditch to jump into.
Even though helicopters would normally be friendlies.
Yep, but you don't know why they're out there because
Yeah.
the shit's hitting the fan somewhere.
And the best move is to stay low.
Yep. Avoid a conflict.
Yeah. So once you got back and got into civilian life, did you go back to school or
I actually went back to work.
doing what?
I worked at the pulp mill
This is in Hoquiam?
in Hoquiam, yep. Yep.
And did you stay there, or
I did a lot of things after that.
did it say, was that because you didn't? Or were you just kind of disconnected from the world, or just because you were trying different things, or didn't know exactly what you wanted to do?
Usually not by my choice.
Yeah.
The pulp mill ended up laying off
Yeah.
after I'd been there for 15, 20 years, and I went to a couple of different jobs. I ended up in Centralia working at the steam plant and would travel 66 miles each way to get to that. And I was an EMT in that power station for 8 years, and that utilized some of my training.
I was going to say that you can actually utilize your skills.
Yep. Came in useful.
Now, I know when we talked, prior to doing the show, you was mentioned at some point you ended up got a sailboat and went sailing. So
Later on, after the power station, we were able to sell our house, my wife and I, and we had 6 kids, and 4 of them were off to college or on their own or whatever. And we took the 2 youngest ones and traveled on a sailboat, took it down to Solomon's Island, Maryland, and put it back together again, and started down the Intercoastal Waterway and headed to Florida. And stopped in Florida to visit some friends of ours for Christmas, and didn't leave for 16 years. We found a nice niche. Put the kids in school there and had a good time. I worked for a hotel there, and my wife worked for a gift shop.
you found a pretty normal life. So during this time,
Nothing's normal in Key West.
or that kind of normal. So during this period of time, did Vietnam come back and affect you at all, or were you able to just put it behind you?
Keeping pretty busy. It didn't bother me too much. But then in '06, we came back up here to be with our children, our grandchildren. And we ended up in an apartment in Lacey, and I could hear the 155 howitzers going off at McCord and Fort Lewis, and it would send a chill through me now and then, and I could hear the helicopters coming by, and eventually one dark and rainy afternoon, it just took me apart. I ended up going up to my primary care physician and telling them, my wife went with me, telling them we need to do something. I can't take it anymore.
So it kind of pretty much just came back to you
It
just
caught up
suddenly.
with me,
Yeah.
Yep.
And there is I've seen an article in a gerontology magazine called Late Adult Traumatic Re-Engagement. And it talks about many of the veterans who came back from Vietnam and pretty much like you, sidled back into a routine life, found work, raised a family, got an education, that sort of thing, and seemed to put it all behind them. And then later on, after they retire, have time on their hands,
Slow down a little bit, yep.
it starts coming back. Or, as you said, a trigger event, the helicopters.
And the artillery.
Yeah.
And the machine guns. I could hear the 50 caliber machine guns going on.
Yeah. People have told me that. I can sometimes hear the guns from Fort Lewis, but pretty rarely. I hear the helicopters a lot.
We're over on Marvin Road, so we're close.
Yeah. And, the helicopters are a very definite reminder. You can't get away from them around here.
Right.
So you did go to the VA for this, so what did
Yep.
what did they do for you?
They ended up starting me on a disability program and giving me medication and psychological help and stuff, and now I've reached 100% disability and receive benefits for that, and life is pretty good. They take pretty good care of me.
Did you have any difficulty qualifying for disability?
It took years to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a struggle. It's a
Yeah.
struggle.
Does
And a
work-
struggle with the medications too. Medications are spikes and valleys.
In what way?
Oh, they either over medicate you, or you don't have enough, or you're just searching.
So finding the right balance.
Searching your way through it, yeah.
Difficult. But you're pretty happy. You're pretty happy with how VA has treated you.
I am.
You hear a lot of complaints about VA, poor treatment, inability to get appointments, but that has not been a problem.
Nope, they've taken pretty good care of me.
Yeah, I say I have a similar experience with the VA. They've done pretty well by me.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the stories you hear are probably quite accurate, but they may not be representative of the entire care there,
Yep.
system-wide. And I think most polls show that most veterans are happy with the care they get. So I'm glad to hear that they're taking good care of you. And then, is there anything from that is now looking back on that you can say I'm stronger because I've done this, because I have these awarenesses?
Yeah, you are.
What would be some of those?
I am more tolerant of a lot of things, and then some things I guess I'm less tolerant of.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think makes you more tolerant?
Being in the military.
Just putting up with all that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. I can easily see where you can easily be less tolerant just because of the things that might have happened.
Frustrating, yeah. Yeah.
But you think you're more, on balance, you think you're more tolerant than less tolerant because of all that?
I'm not sure. I don't know if my PTSD makes me less tolerant also.
Mm-hmm. So you haven't quite figured out exactly what that balance is.
Nope. I'm still working on it. It's
But
not
you-
an exact science.
Yeah. And then you also said that you went back to Vietnam
Last February
of 2019.
of 2019, my wife and I and the man I was stationed with on the artillery battery, the other hospital corpsman, Jay Magner, and his wife went back with us. And we went back to remember and celebrate that two of our fellow comrades had died on February 23rd when we got overrun and had casualties. And we ended up going to Da Nang to start with and spent a night there, and a friend of ours lined us up with a Veterans from Peace representative in Da Nang, and he showed us how to get out to our hill. He actually drove the rental car out to the hill for us, show us where we were, and give us a chance to remember and have that little memorial service, and worked out quite nicely.
Yeah, now you gave me a copy of an article that was in the, let's see if I can find the Deadly Writers Patrol, which is a quarterly publication that provides opportunity for veterans to write about their experience.
This person that wrote about us was Garcia, was from San Diego, and he met us in Da Nang and asked us if we wouldn't mind following along and documenting our story and publishing it. And we entertained that willingly. And so he spent most of a week with us, I think, documenting what we'd done and where we went, and went with us some of the places. And
Because you did more than just the ceremony.
well, we went a bunch of places too, yeah.
So what kind of places did you visit?
We went to a place that a group of people that volunteer to go out and defuse unexploded ordnance. And we went to a Agent Orange group that helps civilians that are still facing Agent Orange problems, second and third generation. and it's ongoing. It doesn't end.
Yeah, there's some like association of victims of Agent Orange.
Yeah,
Vietnamese.
it's an inherited disease that they deal with.
And I think you said you took some supplies as well?
The friend that I was with on Hill 65 became a physician, and he ended up gathering up a whole big sack full of supplies for the little hospital we used to take civilians down to at Dialock. And we took an afternoon and took our supplies out there and visited the hospital, and very interesting to see how it hadn't progressed in,
So-
50 years.
Looked pretty much the same as it
Yeah.
did when you were there?
Yeah. Pretty old and dilapidated.
Did they remember the Marines that had been there 50 years
No.
ago?
No. We had to give them all the information.
But did you have a pretty good sense of connecting with the Vietnamese at that point? In the sense,
We went into it with an open mind,
yeah.
and I had no expectations of what was going to happen, so I was ready for just about anything and delighted with how well it turned out. And I'd recommend that any veteran that continually thinks about the Vietnam War go back over there and see how beautiful a country has turned out to be, and how welcome you are, and how they talk about the American War, and they don't hold any grudges.
Yeah. And I've heard that from any number of veterans who have done that, and I had the same experience myself. I mean, it's kind of baffling, yeah, going back there and being treated so well.
Yep. And very affordable.
Yes. And seeing, and I think seeing, as you point out, seeing the country as it is now, what a beautiful country it is. I mean, at the time we were in the mountains, so I saw it's really beautiful. It's a shame we're at war and it sucks. But going back and seeing it again, and most importantly, engaging with the Vietnamese. It sounded like you guys had some engagement with the Vietnamese civilians while you were in service.
Yeah, we had a little bit, yeah.
I mean, we never did. For all intents and purposes, it's almost like we never left America. And we were always within that cocoon of American culture, and never talked to civilians or had anything to do with them. So going back and seeing them and meeting them and, and spending time with them and actually putting the trust in them,
Yep.
was a big change.
When you're on bridge security, you do interact with them a little bit, yeah. It was rewarding.
Yeah. So you would recommend that to anyone that wants to go back?
I would say yes, do it. It's healing.
And then how long were you there?
Which time?
On your return visit?
We were there 4 weeks.
That's
We went to Vietnam, and we went to Cambodia, Laos, and we ended up in Thailand to fly out of Thailand.
And when you were in Cambodia and Laos, what were you doing?
We were touring on a bus tour.
Were you seeing any effect of the war, or?
Yeah, we went to a lot of different places. We went to Halong Bay and a whole bunch of places. We went up to Hanoi and drove past the prison that they used to keep our prisoners in.
Oh, the Hanoi Hilton?
Hanoi Hilton, yeah. Very enlightening. The traffic over there is horrendous. Come up to a stoplight, which there are stoplights now, they weren't then, and there's 150 scooters at the front of the pack. And the light changes and they're gone.
And did you learn how to cross the street?
Why we didn't cross any streets?
Oh, you didn't?
Nope. Nope.
I was told to step out, find a spot, step out, and keep moving.
Yeah, don't make eye contact, yeah.
It's different from where everything is nice and orderly here in America. Well, given all that, I mean, you say you've come back and you're part of Veterans for Peace now. How does your Vietnam experience affect your interest in Vietnam, Veterans for Peace and the Veterans for Peace mission?
I'm very enthused by it. I'm looking for a niche to be a willing participant in. I'm happy to go, and I acknowledge all of the programs that they're offering and think they're doing a good job.
Actually, when you were there and talking about the mine people in Vietnam, did you get to meet Chuck Searcy from the Veterans for Peace? He's heading up, I think it's the mine removal program there.
We met a man up north, and I can't recall his name.
Yeah. Because that's been one of VFP's larger efforts, helping clear out all the unexploded ordnance, and then also promoting removal of the Agent Orange.
Yeah.
Which they have now removed. I think they have now completely remediated the Da Nang airport. They still have the Bien Hoa Air Base yet to go, so there's still a fair amount of it. But as you say, it's there, it's in the soil, it's continuing on down through the generations.
Yep.
And then, so thinking about it now, how would you describe your thoughts and feelings about the war, about your experience? You've had 50 years to reflect on it, think about it.
You think about it daily.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's made me who I am today, I guess. And I have to deal with it.
Yeah, it's not something you can change.
No, you can't change it.
You know, sometimes I think about it and like, it's there, and like, it's hard to imagine not having that as part of my experience. Yet think, oh, do I want that? You know, it's kind of like can't quite reconcile those two things. They keep floating around.
Can't run away from it.
Then a helicopter comes over and reminds me of it all again.
Yeah.
And then, would you, based on your experience, what advice would you offer anyone to a young person who might be considering joining the military? It's a very different situation these days.
Do a lot of research.
Yeah.
Find out if it's really what you want to do.
Yeah. So think about, like, when you joined, what did you have something in particular that you wanted to do other than just dodge draft or avoid the draft?
Well, I didn't want to be drafted for sure, and they asked me what I was doing at the time, and I was working in a drugstore part-time, and they said, you could become a corpsman. And I said, yeah, that sounds good. But, they said, but there's a drawback. You might have to go to Vietnam. I said, I'll take my chances, I guess. And that's what I did.
Yeah. And you said at one point you worked as an EMT, so you got to use some of those experiences.
Yep.
Did you ever consider making that a career, or is that too much from Vietnam?
I did consider being a physician's assistant for a while, but I didn't. I was married at the time to a different wife, and she wasn't willing to sponsor me to do it. So I just let it go.
I see.
Wasn't meant to happen.
Yeah, sometimes those things work out a certain way.
Yep. So I ended up working on machinery instead. So it didn't matter if the machinery didn't survive or not. If you're working on a patient, it matters if they survive. So it took a lot of pressure off.
Yeah. Yeah, machines are kind of forgiving.
Yep.
And you did, as you mentioned, you spent a fair amount of time cruising the intracoastal waterway down the East Coast, and then 16 years in Florida. So.
Yep, we had a good time. I drove a tall ship down there, schooner Western Union, take tourists out for the evening sunset, give them free alcohol, and tried to bring them all back safely.
And probably did.
Had a good time, yep. And I got paid to do it.
Sounds a lot better than being out in the jungle, carrying
for sure.
a huge pack, hoping nobody kills you.
For sure.
So it's, I mean, all things considered, I mean, it seems like you've come through it pretty well. It's obviously left you with some residuals, but they're there. I mean, that's part of the consequence of war. I think that's.
Yeah, and how do you know what you would have been otherwise?
Yeah, or if you hadn't gone, what would have
Right.
been? Those counterfactuals are just not available for you to reconsider.
Nope.
So you live with it and make of it what you will. Definitely appreciate you coming to us to be Veterans for Peace, because we're trying to change that model of war, or that kind of reflexive idea that yes, everything has a military solution.
Right. And I agree with their thoughts now.
Yeah, it took me a while. It takes a while for those to evolve. And most importantly, I really appreciate you sharing the story, because people don't hear these, and I always like to say there any number of stories. Everybody has their own story, and that makes up the totality of the war. I mean, there's a history, and that's the large view, but down at the level we were, those are the,
What I've found is that the longer you go in time, the more good stuff you remember, and the more of the bad stuff you forget.
Yeah.
I remember sitting on top of a hill on road security for Haivon Pass, looking down over the South China Sea, and remembering how beautiful it was. Someday it'd be nice to come back, and I did.
Yeah. And I had a similar response to being in the mountains. They're beautiful. What it would be like if they weren't at war. We weren't trashing it.
Right.
So it does give you some sense of perspective. And I think more than anything else, being at war, it gives you certainly an appreciation for life. Just the daily routine, how fragile it is. So I really appreciate you coming here talking about it. I'd be glad to hear any more thoughts you might have on it, but we'll add this to our collection of stories. People can go to our YouTube channel, that's VFP, it's youtube.com/VFP, and there are episodes. Actually, Dennis is probably putting those up on the screen now, or will. So we'll add that to it, and along with the other stories from the Full Disclosure podcast.
Okay.
But I do appreciate it. So thank you very much, David.
Thank you for the interview.
You're welcome. So beneath the broad outlines of America is a mosaic of individual stories. David's story, along with many others that have been recorded, written, or simply told, provide fine detail to a history that often overlooks the reality of war. David and the many others who have shared their experiences serve their country and the world by telling the truth. Thank you for watching, and thank you for listening.